Our regulars know that our custom here, and everyone that's on YouTube, welcome, Shabbat Shalom. Our custom here at Beth Meyer for many, many years is to study the Torah portion of the week in a conversational fashion. Typically, me and Rabbi Jenny, we pass out a text and we study a piece of the Torah portion or something from rabbinic literature together, and it's one of the highlights of our Shabbat experience, and everyone's invited. However, on a rare occasion, I take rabbinic privilege to give an old-fashioned sermon. And this, I know some of my congregants going, oh, yeah, enough, Rabbi. No, okay, give me a chance, all right? Once in a while, I'm going to give a sermon. And the reason I'm giving a sermon this Shabbat is twofold. One, because I hope the message, I hope, if successful, please God, will resonate with members of our congregation, also those who are visiting here. Hopefully for everyone that's here experiencing Shabbat here at Beth Meyer. But also to prepare you because we are, as a congregation, we've been selected across the country to participate in a specific project from an organization called Resetting the Table, which I'll explain in a second what that is. And you, first of all, members of our congregation, in the next week or so, may be contacted by me or other leaders in our congregation, including Jim Dorfler, who I assume is here, Jim Dorfler, and Samantha Godlich, who is part of the staff at Beth Meyer. You may be contacted about this project. And in addition, we may receive positive press about this project because we are engaging this Resetting the Table project with a number of other houses of worship and communities, spiritual communities, here in Raleigh and actually throughout the country. So let me tell you about what Resetting the Table is about. But before I tell you its exact definition, let me tell you through my Torah sermon version, okay? So if you ask people, what's the most important commandment in the Torah? What's the most important mitzvah in the Torah? We could have a debate about it, but many people would say, love your neighbor as yourself is the most important commandment. And many rabbis, ministers, imams, etc. have said, why is this commandment so powerful? Because it's unifying of all the world's major religions is to love your neighbor. That is a fundamental piece. And not only that, by the way, it comes not in this week's Torah portion, but in next week's Torah portion, in the middle of Leviticus, in the middle of the holiest code of the Torah. It is like these 5 or 6 words that everybody says, yes, of course. Who could disagree with love your neighbor as yourself? Well, let me just say I could actually disagree. Why? Because, loving your neighbor sounds great in the Torah, and loving your neighbor is so easy when you actually really love your neighbor. But I have this neighbor across the street from us, that still has his political sign up from 2016. I won't mention what the political sign is. You might be able to guess. Some of you know me well enough to know I have a certain perspective on politics. And this neighbor, who I do see from time to time walking in the neighborhood, walking his dog, and I try to exude that love. I try. But I really want him to take down that sign. And because he doesn't take down that sign, which actually we've never discussed, I find that the love in my heart is definitely blocked. And to be fair, some of you know, me and Rabbi Jenny have a certain sign in our front yard. I won't say what that sign is. It's not a political sign per se, but it's a provocative sign. To some people it would be a provocative sign. And I bet every time he passes my sign, he probably doesn't feel the love for his neighbor when he sees that. Not to mention the neighbors that cut you off on Falls of the Noose, or the neighbors who you see on social media who say something that bothers you, or just the other, whatever neighbor you may have in your class or school or your business for whatever reason rubs you the wrong way. So love your neighbor sounds really great on paper. It sounds really great as a vision, but in practice, we are failing, and I include myself. And I say not just we as a Jewish community, I say we as the United States. Perhaps the greatest challenge, I'm telling you what you already know, in the United States today is what I would say is a refraction of the mitzvah of love your neighbor, which is in order to love your neighbor, you actually have to know your neighbor. You actually have to speak to your neighbor. I have to get past the sign on the yard, and he has to get past the sign on my yard in order to actually come close enough and actually feel safe enough to have a conversation with my neighbor. That is the essence of resetting the table. Resetting the table was started about a decade ago within the Jewish community by a rabbi who me and Jenny are blessed to know and have known for many years since the rabbinical school, Melissa Weintraub. And she started the organization, the beginning of it, was because she noticed, which if you're in a synagogue, you'll know as well, that one of the greatest battles in the Jewish community today is over politics of the state of Israel. Many people in the Jewish community, when we say there are 2 Jews and 3 opinions, when it comes to Israel, there are 2 Jews and 55 opinions on what Israel should or should not do regarding Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And it has caused enormous tensions within the Jewish community. I'm not talking about outside. I'm talking inside the Jewish community. And so she creates an organization to say, we will come to synagogues, Jewish community centers, federations, whatever, youth groups, and help in a safe and moderated way to let people share what they think about the conflict so they can actually listen to each other and, so to speak, love their Jewish neighbor. Well, it was so successful and so in need that other organizations that have nothing to do with Judaism, just across the country, said, we want to come and have that same common conversation, not necessarily about Israel, but about American politics, about immigration, about climate change and how we should deal with it, about how we should deal with the budget, or defense, or name the issue across our country. We can't seem to be able to talk to our neighbors about it. Now, what's interesting is we sat at the table when they were commissioned to try this project beyond just the Jewish community, about issues in American politics in general. They said, well, you know where we need to go? It's not going to help us, forgive me, guys, if we go to Brookline, Massachusetts, where everybody agrees, okay? Or Providence. We need to go to places that are purple. Places where red meets blue, like literally on my street. I once looked it up, and my street has 40% one party, 40% affiliated other party, and 20% unaffiliated. Almost directly, you could say almost like a bell curve in my block of where I live in the neighborhood, just in Northridge right here. This state, we know, is on the front lines of what it means to be purple. Therefore, it's the place for this to happen. What's interesting enough, they reached out to, where are there places where people are coming together, have some social bonds that could possibly engage in the conversation? As they said, houses of worship, synagogues, churches, and mosques. So they reached out across the United States, and they particularly targeted Raleigh, North Carolina. So our synagogue is part of this pilot project, which again will be starting next few weeks, where we'll be coming together in small groups at first as a test project with people invited to participate, to sit around with heavy moderation, to actually talk to each other. And the goal of the group is not an amen corner. The goal of the group is that people on one side and on the other side, and then people, as we know, who are idiosyncratic, and all human beings don't fall neatly into one side or the other, to actually try to love and listen to one's neighbor. So there are churches that we've invited right here in the neighborhood, and even a mosque in the area, as well as other places across the country doing this at the same time. And you may see this a little bit in local press, in our News Observer potentially, but definitely in Jewish community press. All right. Now, what else do I want to just kind of throw out there in the course of the conversation is what resetting the tables innovation, what we call a chiddush. What's special about it? Because, they sit us down. So just to back up for a second, me, Jim, and Samantha, and a few others, we participated in training sessions with resetting the table to see how they're going to do it. So basically, they did it with us, with a lot of clergy, actually, from across the country, from all kinds of places, rural places, urban places, etc., suburban places like us, all over to come together and try their strategies to see how it works, right? See if it's effective, all right? Which it was very much effective. And their chiddush, their innovation, is one that I don't think is going to be an innovation for you. And for anyone who's been involved in community organizing, you'll know it from the start. But their teaching is not that they're trying to get people around the table or in the room to tell each other their opinions first. Although there will be space to offer your opinion about various political issues of the day. That is absolutely the goal. But the first thing they ask is, tell us one or two cardinal moments in your life story that affect the way you look at the United States and the way you look at the world. And when they ask that people to share their story, and people share stories about how they grew up in houses of poverty, or times of abuse, or people that were deeply influenced by the military, some that say would save their lives, or others that were affected by someone who was an addict in their house or their family or their neighborhood, or someone who went to a good school and how it changed their lives, or someone went to a school that was not well funded and it changed their lives and made lives difficult in more other ways, you begin to understand that the way that people get to, regardless of where they sit on the political spectrum in the end, is often rooted in one's personal story of what their life is. So if we take the time, Resetting the Table says, to listen first to people's stories and really love them for their story, then possibly we'll be open up enough with enough compassion to actually hear where they come from. And let me just give you an example that here it happened at Beth Meyer a number of years ago. I've told the story before, but some of you maybe remember, but I feel it's a relatively new crowd because it happened a long time ago. That reveals exactly this issue, that when you learn someone's personal story, things change, even if you disagree with them wholeheartedly. An example. We have this amazing bar mitzvah. You got Andrew Kamen, okay? Not to embarrass him too much, but you got an A-plus guy here. I don't know about his soccer game, but he's a good bar mitzvah, all right? And he's done the Torah and the Haftarah. He's given amazing commentary. He's leading part of the prayers. This is outstanding, and frankly, this is what we hope and invite every single student to do. But at Beth Meyer, and I'm not the only one across the country, but our position here is that we encourage every child to do as much of the service and Torah learning as they possibly can. We want them essentially to become rabbi for a day. That's basically what's happening here. But there are many children who are not able to do that. Why? Some of you would know. Some children have learning challenges. Some children struggle with anxiety. Some children do not have the support of their parents to help get them to the meetings. Now with Zoom, it's a little easier, but frankly, not everyone can get here easily for various reasons. So because of that, a number of years ago, there was a student who came here on the Bima, and he had struggled enormously in preparation for the bar mitzvah. I worked together with one of our amazing tutors to bring him onto this Bima. But he struggled deeply with learning disabilities. He had severe anxiety. And his parents were in the process of going through a divorce. Going through a divorce at any time is difficult, but specifically during a life cycle experience, incredibly hard. But to the parents' tremendous credit, they held together as best they could, even though they themselves were not too happy with each other. They, for the sake of their son, they kept a smile on, and they pushed through. And the son, after lots of work with me and the tutor and the parents together, we were able to bring him onto the Bima. And I'll tell you, that day on Shabbat, we were so nervous and he was so nervous. We were worried he would run off the Bima, or God forbid, he would faint. He was so worried. When he came up and did just what Andrew did so easily, but so beautifully, the Shema Yisrael at the Torah, I thought I was going to cry from anxiety myself. He did it beautifully. But that's all he did. He just did the Shema Yisrael. He didn't read from the Torah. He didn't do the prophetic reading the Haftarah. He didn't give a sermon. But the family in the front row was hysterical with tears. I was verklempt, as we say, crying. We were so moved. At the end of the service, which we'll see in just a moment, we have a motzi and make a l'chaim and make a kiddush at the end with some drink. It was so moving. This is before COVID. We gave him a hug. We all felt together. It was like a celebration of Bima we'd never felt before. But there was one member of our congregation who will go unnamed, who was in the back row of the synagogue that day, sitting in one of the seats that some of our people are sitting right there. And he's I should say, may he rest in peace. He was a very, very committed member of our congregation. And he loved Shabbat services. And he was very beloved and kind. And a lot of the young kids got to know him because he came every Shabbat, basically. And he used to pray very loudly. He actually had a beautiful voice. And it was beautiful. But he was also a bit judgmental. And that Shabbat, as the service came to a close on the Bima and did the motzi, and we're moved very loud to the back, he elbowed his friend and said, "Oh, that's what they call bar mitzvah nowadays? That rabbi's horrible. He'll let anybody come on the Bima and call it a bar mitzvah." And the family, the parents, heard it and turned around, and it's like they were going to rip him to shreds. So I quickly took them aside, and I went to the back of the shul, and I grabbed his arm, and I pulled him into the lobby right back there. I won't say his name. Careful, please don't let me say his name. Okay, and I said, do you realize that what happened today on this bima was a miracle equivalent to the splitting of the Red Sea? You have no idea. He goes, what do you mean, Rabbi? You let him off the hook. I don't know about the hook. This young man was superhuman in his ability and this family. What do you mean? And I proceeded to explain, without going into too much detail for sake of privacy, but I basically explained in large steps what I've told you here. And he said, I had no idea. I said, aha. So you need to come back. And he did without even being much pushed. And he apologized to the parents, who very angrily basically pushed him to the side, but okay. What's the point of that story? The point is not just that this amazing kid overcame, and I'm proud of our synagogue for supporting that. That's what we're about here, Beth Meyer. That's true. But about the fact that when this man didn't know the reasons why this boy was like this, he could sit back in judgment and say the meanest things in the world. But when he heard his story, aha. Now let me tell you, this man still thinks every bar and bat mitzvah child should read the Torah and do the Haftarah. He didn't change his opinion. And that's okay. He can still hold his opinion. But when you meet a real neighbor with a real life experience who shares it with you, sometimes your heart is a little more open to why the person at least has that opinion. Does that mean they're going to be best friends? No. But I think the Torah saying love your neighbor means love a person as if you hold them as a neighbor that you know. You know their story. You don't just judge them from your Facebook typing, okay? You judge them after you know them. The two greatest rabbis in the Talmud arguably are Hillel and Shammai, and they disagree over and over and over again. But Hillel and Shammai don't hate each other because they knew each other. They respected each other, even if they disagreed with each other. And that's the goal of resetting the table. So what's the take home for you here and for you on YouTube, all right? In the next few weeks, we're going to reach out to a certain group of people, a diverse group of people, to invite them to participate in this program. And if you yourself are interested in participating in the program or want to learn more about it, Jim is here and he raised his hand, and you can come talk to me. To be candid, the group will be very small at the beginning, and we're not just taking volunteers only. We have to select a diverse group. So there may be more groups that come down the pike. But if you're interested, you want to learn more, you want to possibly participate, you definitely can speak to Jim and to me. But I want you to know that we will be starting with this project going forward with a small group. And hopefully, if you hear about it in the news or in other press or talking about it, you'll know, why is Beth Meyer doing Resetting the Table? The reason is because we believe in love your neighbor as yourself. That doesn't mean that this rabbi or that rabbi are going to necessarily change all our opinions, okay? I happen to think I have good opinions, okay? But if I do it through love of my neighbor and not just of judgment of my neighbor, then maybe we have a way to fix our country, to fix our congregation, and to be what the Torah wants us to be, which is truly one people with multiple opinions that can still love one another. So, Shabbat Shalom. I invite you to think about this idea, and any questions, feel free to come talk to us about it after the service. Kol hakavod.